Good morning. How are you today? It is a glorious day in Virginia in the 70s, so you can't beat that. I've been terribly frustrated by hearing part of, in the background, the Andrew Brown press conference in North Carolina. I kept thinking that what we were hearing was the defense for a murder by police against a man who was black on the pretext that they had to protect themselves from him driving his car away as if it were a weapon. And so they opened with Glock 17s and AR 15s and shot at him. And a number of the bullets were collected, and they had a number that just didn't make sense if there were 5 people shooting Glock 17s and AR 15s. But let's talk a little bit about Brown. The DA, as I understand it today, was running the press conference. I didn't pay enough attention, so I apologize, but I'm pretty sure that's who it was. And what he basically did was he spent the whole time slandering Andrew Brown. He described him as a drug dealer, a very significant drug dealer. Well, I prosecuted drug cases in New York. We called it the junk unit. Small cases and very large cases against organized crime and against street people. And my cases were almost exclusively heroin cases, which I considered maybe, and maybe wrongly, the only serious drugs worth pursuing, particularly as they were unloading heroin into the black communities on the Upper East Side above 110th Street. So, and that was what Matthew Madonna and Leroy Nicky Barnes were doing. So what kind of a drug dealer is Andrew Brown? Andrew Brown is a guy that they did hand-to-hand transactions. That means Brown stood there and handed drugs in exchange for money to an undercover officer who presumably had a Nagra or some other taping device and recorded the conversation. Now, in my experience, big drug dealers don't do hand-to-hand transactions. Other people in their network, if you will, are on the street doing that. And he, the head of this group, is twice, 3 times, 4 times removed from the actual street operations. So Andrew Brown, in other words, was a guy making some money selling whatever drugs, and I'm not sanctioning it, but he wasn't a big drug dealer. There's no report that he had to kill anybody or ever did. They came after him with an arrest warrant based on these 2 buys that were made hand-to-hand with an officer, and a search warrant to search his house and his cars for evidence of what? Slips, money, drugs. And apparently they tried to get him the night before, and they couldn't find him. And there's a report that he stayed away from home because he thought that he was being followed or they were out to get him. So he ends up at his house, and what happens there? It appears that even today, we haven't seen the 2 hours of tape. There are, as I understand it, 5 cameras at least, and 3 of them are on 30 minutes. 1 is on 17 minutes, and 1 is on 3 minutes. I don't know why that would be, if they're all involved. And in the truck that went to the site, there were more than 5 people who went there. So I don't know why it'd be only 5 that had cameras on. And it appeared during the press conference today that a small number of discharges were identified. I think they said something like total of 17 spread among 5 people. The worst aspect of this case, it seems to me, is that Brown was somehow shot right in the back of the head, right where the brain is. Now, the officer who shot him is not identified, but it means he had to be behind him. And their argument is that he was using his car as a weapon against them, and they defended themselves against the car. But the DA also agreed that all he wanted to do was to get away from the officers, so he didn't really want to strike them. And there are reports from local newspapers that Andrew Brown drove his car across the lawn, or was trying to, and he backed away from the officers rather than strike them. So we have a situation in which they're using, pretty serious weapons. Glock 17 is favored because it has it has 17. It can handle 17 shots, and it's smooth and operates and doesn't misfire. The AR-15 is thought of as a combat weapon, right? Semi-automatic. So if you listen to an excerpt of the tape that they played today while they weren't making the tapes available to the public, you hear a lot of shouting and screaming and shooting. So until we see all the tapes, we won't know what's going on. And if Maine Justice hasn't gone down there, we're not going to know what happened unless they have a straight investigation, civil rights investigations of the killing of Andrew Brown unnecessarily on a stop to arrest him and to search his home. The defense of a murder, there are a number of ways to defend a murder, but there are two broad categories. One is, I didn't do it. And, there's subdivisions, alibi, and so forth. And the second one is, he deserved to be shot dead. And that's the one that this DA has chosen to protect his racist cops who killed an unarmed man sitting in a car on a bullshit drug charge. Why? Because he was black. And because these self-appointed racists think they can get away with anything. Well, I think that the object today was to destroy the reputation of Andrew Brown and to justify killing him and to save all the police officers from being prosecuted. That's not the end of this story. This is going to go on. And I think in the end, this DA is going to find himself without a job, and some officers are going to find themselves on the wrong end of charges, federal or state. And this will have a happier ending than it does right now. There are other crazy things going on in Arizona. We have people grifting with taxpayer dollars, the Maricopa County returns to prove somehow or other that the count wasn't right. It's the biggest county in the state of Arizona, and there's a large black vote there, and that's what that's about. We have unidentified flying objects, and unidentified doesn't tell us that they necessarily came from another planet, but it's an interesting study, and there's going to be actually a government report on it. The more things change, the more they get stranger. So those are the kind of the stories that interest me. The Brown thing drives me crazy because it's such a lie what that DA said today. He should be kicked out of office immediately. So have a good day, get out, and I'll talk to you tomorrow. Bye-bye.